Hello once again, everybody, and thank you for joining me here on this Thursday, April 23rd edition of Bang the Book Radio. My name is Adam Burke, your host for the next half hour or so as we talk about the first round of the NFL Draft with professional handicapper John Ryan at John Ryan Sports and the number one on Twitter. We're talking about some prop bets that we're looking at. We're going to talk about the wide receivers, what happens with the number 3 pick with the Lions, and kind of examine what's going on out there in the betting markets for tonight's first round. Over at bangthebook.com. Make sure you check out Wednesday's edition of Bang the Book Radio with Thor Nystrom of Roto World. Lots of draft stuff in that. And I've been doing a lot of draft coverage here over the last couple of weeks, looking at some of the odds that are out there, some of my thought processes for the first round tonight. Good stuff over there at the website. And for this weekend, got a couple of big stakes races down at Oaklawn Park. So I'll be writing up previews for those over at bangthebook.com. Finally, as you know, this and every edition of Bang the Book Radio presented by our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. BTB and the number 200 is that promo code. 100% deposit match bonus for the sportsbook, 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino at BetDSI. It's only a game until you bet it. We bring on our only guest today. That is John Ryan at John Ryan Sports and the number one on Twitter. John, how's it going today, man?
I'm doing okay, Adam. I'm trying to figure out if I even know what day it is, and we just live in a different world, don't we?
Yeah, we definitely do. I mean, at least we know what day it is today because it is the first round of the NFL Draft here on Thursday night. Wanted to fit one more show in, cram this one in for you with some additional draft thoughts here from John and I. And John, let's go ahead and start right away by just talking about, this draft in general. I mean, this virtual concept now, all these team employees are going to be at their separate homes. They're going to be trying to Zoom in or Skype in or whatever these teams try to do. I can't see this thing going off without a hitch tonight.
Yeah, it's going to be, as you know, today I had problems even getting logged into our show for various reasons, and I'm a tech-savvy guy, and it just kind of blew my mind. So to your point, I can't imagine literally sitting in a basement that there's not going to be some kind of communication breakdown. And, they have that 10-minute window between drafts. We've seen Minnesota lose a pick a couple years ago, and that didn't involve this stuff. So I would think there's going to be a little leeway. I haven't read anything about that. It's usually, it gets phoned in, and then a guy puts it on a 3x5 card, gives it to another guy, and then it's all dressed up and given to Goodell. But what I was thinking, it's going to be nice for Goodell tonight because he's not going to get booed every time he comes on the stage.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, he'll certainly get booed on social media and some of the other forms of communication out there. But, something I was kind of thinking about here, I've kind of been expecting a conservative first round here where I don't think there are going to be as many trades as people expect. We could see teams kind of move up for the quarterbacks and whatnot. I don't think it'll be as busy as people expect. On the other hand, a lot of times you're kind of sitting there waiting for the team in front of you or the two teams in front of you to make their picks before you make your final determination. And you've got, effectively 6-7 minutes to decide on that before you try to tell Roger Goodell or whoever's in charge of that what you're going to do. So I don't know. I mean, you're going to have to give some of these teams a little bit of leeway, maybe a time bank, maybe some extensions, something like that. But it's tough because I think these teams would feel a lot more comfortable if they could complete their trades this afternoon. But because the draft process is so fluid and you don't know exactly who the team in front of you is going to take, it may be kind of difficult to do that. So I don't know. I think this thing could just be pure chaos tonight.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I think I agree with you with the number of trades is probably not going to be as active as people think. But I do think there's going to be the possibility of a blockbuster going after Detroit's number 3 pick. And that's just a gut feeling. I know what I've read on the internet and heard on TV that, it's going to take a king's ransom to get that pick. But if that pick is that quarterback, Herbert, then there's a few franchises out there that might throw away the future for 3 years to get that guy. So, I can make a case, and I've done it with some of my buddies here while we've been quarantined here in the Philadelphia region, that he might be a better quarterback than Burrow. Burrow, I've read stuff where, his NFL ceiling could be limited, which I think is a bunch of, hogwash. The guy proved in the last year that work ethic is everything. And he put his mind to what he wanted to accomplish, and he made one of the biggest advances I've ever seen any athlete ever make in one single season. So I think, to put a ceiling on him is ludicrous. But how about something completely out the window that the Patriots trade up to get him? Is that out of the realm of question? It's been a long time since the Patriots have even had a number one pick because they trade them away and they bring in proven players. I'm just not convinced that, the Patriots aren't setting themselves up possibly for a, modified tanking. No offense to the quarterbacks they have right now, but they're not ones that I think can carry them deep into the playoffs. They don't have the wide receiver cores, and they don't have Brady. So I thought that would be, way out there in left field and would shock everybody if they did that. But who's to say they won't?
Well, I think it's one of those things where you kind of have to figure out, what package the Patriots could put together to make that big of a leap. I mean, you're talking about jumping up, 20 picks here, which is a lot for a team like the Lions to give up when they need a top 5 caliber player. And if that's Okudah or if it's Derek Brown or if it's somebody else remains to be seen. But Okudah still the smallest price to go third overall here, plus 155 in that type of range. Tua, the second price at plus 225. That would require a trade. Field is next at 3-1, which is pretty much Justin Herbert. That's really the only option I foresee in terms of a Field type of pick because he's not actually listed at some places. Then Derek Brown plus 350. And, maybe they do go the safe route with a guy like Derek Brown, a guy that can stop the run in the middle of that defense. But, ultimately, I think if somebody trades up, it's for Tua or Herbert, whichever one that they prefer. And a lot of people saying that maybe the Dolphins move up from 5 to 3 and may even take the best offensive lineman on the board. I guess that kind of falls under this, Field group as well. I don't really see that being the case. I think that's just conjecture. I think it's just clickbait and engagement bait from some of the writers that are out there because you're going to get a really good lineman at 5 if you want to take one. I also don't think that you really need to move up to take a quarterback. We know Burrow's 1, Chase Young is 2. If the Lions keep that pick at 3, they're going defense with it. They're not going to take a quarterback. And at 4, we know the Giants just took Daniel Jones, and they want an offensive lineman. So I don't really think in my personal opinion, I don't think anybody trades up for that Lions pick. I think the Lions are doing their due diligence, and they should. But I don't think there's a pressing need to do that because unless you really rate somebody like Wills higher than Wirfs or Thomas, you don't need to leapfrog the Giants. So I think it's just a lot of smoke, and I don't think that there's going to be a whole lot of fire with that 3 pick personally.
I can see that.
Unless, like you said, there's a significant wild card like in New England or somebody. Then I can kind of see it.
But like you said, to jump that many, it's going to take at least 2 number ones in the future on top of it.
And those are late first-round picks in all likelihood, too.
That's correct. Yep. Now, I think another interesting wild card situation that is worth talking about is the Eagles. And they need a wide receiver desperately. They need a guy that can stretch the defenses. There's been rumor that Alshon Jeffrey is actually, I guess I would say, on the block as a possibility of being included in a trade to move up. But there's so many wide receivers in this draft. This is, obviously everybody knows it's the deepest wide receiver draft we've seen in more than a decade and maybe even longer. And I also don't think CeeDee Lamb is probably the top one, although he's awesome. But I have Ruggs number 1. Just because of the speed and the athleticism is just out the window ridiculous. He's a guy that could stretch defenses vertically and horizontally. And I say that kind of sarcastically, but can you imagine him being lined up in the slot against a linebacker? I mean, that would be the mismatch of all mismatches. So, and I'm not taking any away from CeeDee Lamb either. I mean, he's a stud, and he could do the same thing. But I just kind of like the speed and the athleticism, and I'm sure everybody saw his YouTube videos too that involved a round ball with basketball, obviously, and the talent that the kid has is just immense. So,
and as we look at the wide receiver position, kind of looking at some of the odds that are out there, it seems like right now Jerry Jeudy is falling, and Jerry Jeudy, some questions. I don't want to say with the makeup, but some questions with a potential surgical situation that he had recently or a year or so ago that didn't really come to light. He doesn't really have the same kinds of measurables as Ruggs in the sense that Ruggs has the big hands, like we talked about on yesterday's show with Thor Nystrom. Ruggs has the elite level speed. Jeudy seems to be falling a little bit to the point where you've got CeeDee Lamb likely going first, Ruggs going second in that wide receiver triumvirate, but you may have Ruggs go first, Lamb go second. It all depends on kind of fit. If you're the Eagles and you're sitting there and you want to take a wide receiver, you've got Jeudy kind of falling now. So maybe you don't have to move up from 21 to, 12 or 13 to get a guy that you want. Maybe you only have to move up to 15 or 16, lower cost in terms of draft picks that you have to give up. And at the same time, you also sit there and say, how much more do we like Jerry Jeudy than a Justin Jefferson or a Denzel Mims, something like that? And Jefferson's, draft position kind of in that spot 21.5 around where Philadelphia is picking. We know Denzel Mims has been a pretty popular guy in terms of the yes, no prop for being a first rounder. That's yes or no minus 120 at some places. Yes, a little bit higher at others. So the Eagles have options, and all these teams that want a wide receiver have options as well. But I think the most intriguing storyline here is the movement in the marketplace with Judy's over prop, over 12.5, over 13.5, now minus $2, minus 230 in that range. Looks like Ruggs is going to go second now. You're going to have Lamb first, Ruggs second, Jeudy third, with Jeudy dropping down the board a little bit. And I talked about this earlier in the week at bangthebook.com that you want to let the betting markets be your guide for the draft. The betting markets will tell you with a higher degree of confidence than these mock drafts of what's going to happen. And it looks like right now, based on what we're seeing, Jerry Jeudy is dropping down some boards here. So maybe that's a trade scenario where the Eagles can move up from 21 to 14 or 15 or something and get a guy like Jeudy.
I think that would be an excellent fit too. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think Judy's dropping because he had a pretty terrible combine, and then he run a really pretty bad 40, and he dropped a lot of balls, and he just didn't seem to be focused at all.
Well, and that's one of those things too. We talk about maybe the concerns with how this draft plays out. I think a lot of teams will be pretty risk averse. I think there will be more of a conservative approach to this draft just because of everything that's going on, the questionable medicals for some guys, haven't been able to have those in-person visits, this and that. And if you start having concerns about a guy like Jeudy, who may very well be the best wide receiver in the draft, time will tell. But, GMs are going to have their jobs on the line. Teams, ownership, fans, they don't care that this draft is being held in the time of quarantine. They want results. And if you've got worries about Jeudy or some of these other guys, you may take a more conservative approach. And with Jeudy, the surgery announcement, and then as you mentioned, kind of a lackluster combine, and teams haven't been able to do private workouts or anything like that. So, some team may end up getting a really good player that just tested poorly or had some bad things come out at the wrong time.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, too, I was going to ask you a question. Of the players, of these wide receivers, and you're a GM, looking at, Jeudy, and let's take out Lamb because he's going to be gone. Ruggs is going to be gone. And, again, we're talking about the Eagles' position here. And then you have the kid from LSU, Jefferson, the kid from Arizona State, Pittman from USC, You mentioned Mims from Baylor. The one from TCU, Jalen Rieger. And dropping down a little bit further, Chase Claypool, Notre Dame, even KJ Hamler, Penn State, which is not obviously a number one. So let's scratch him off of my list here. And then there's a wide receiver from Colorado I actually heard on your podcast yesterday that is quite impressive, Chanot. So let's pick Chanot. This is your pool of wide receivers to select from for the Eagles if it's your turn to pick. So you have a choice of Chanot, Rieger, Mims, Pittman, Higgins, Ayuk, Jefferson, and Judy. If you ended up with any of those, would you be okay?
To me, if I'm staying at 21 and I'm Philadelphia, I don't think Judy's there. I think you have to trade up to get Judy. Judy's still the guy I would want. I'm not going to let the combine and, maybe a surgical procedure in the past overcome what I saw on film. Because, look, I understand Alabama's an NFL caliber team playing college football, but Judy's, game tape looks really good. So if I can get him, if I can trade up at a minimal cost, I'm taking him. If not, I'm getting Justin Jefferson because he's a huge target, a great red zone opportunity. I'm not as sold on the other guys. So maybe I even look to either trade back and sort of maximize my position, or I take a really good defensive player that's going to be sitting there. And later in the draft, I take an Antonio Gandy-Golden or, one of these Michael Pittman. He's a second-round grade. I trade up for Shenault in the second round, something like that. I don't think you're hard-pressed to get a first-round wide receiver here unless it's a guy that you really, really like. I think you're going to get great wide receivers throughout the second, third, and fourth rounds too. So, to me, I take a safe, smart defensive player to help out that side of the ball, and then I get my wide receivers in the second and third rounds if I have to trade up for them or not.
See, that's the idea I like, Adam. I was trying to lead you down that path a little bit. That I know the Eagle fans would be crazy mad if they don't take a wide receiver with the first pick. But they could draft a pretty darn good cornerback at 21, and to your point, go in the second round, and that Antonio Gandy-Golden from Liberty would be an awesome second round pick, I think. And if Pittman's still around, he would be even better, in my opinion. So then you accomplish both goals, kind of in a different way than the fans would like to see you do it. But the Eagles were torched last year on the corners. Now they did pick up in free agency a stud, but you got to cover both sides of the field too. So I like your idea there. Now,
as we're talking about the wide receivers here, let's touch on this. Over under 5.5 wide receivers in the first round. The over is minus 160 here. So that's a pretty juicy proposition, understandably so. Again, such a great wide receiver draft here. 5 Dimes actually has that one at minus 145 on the over, so a little bit better of a price there. But as you sort of go through and look at some of the position groups that are a little bit deficient here, after the top 4 offensive linemen, pretty big drop-off from that point forward, although a lot of offensive linemen expected to go in the first round here. I think there's only 3 defensive backs I'd be really comfortable taking in the first round. You've got, obviously, Okudah. You've got Henderson. And I think A.J. Terrell from Clemson is going to go in the first round here, too. But, man, I got to see 6 wide receivers in the first round, right? If not 7.
I fully agree with that. I think it's going to be 7. I definitely think that's an over bet that I would love to make. At 5.5, I actually think that started out at some of the books when it first opened up, a month ago. At 4.5, you can believe that, and now it's up where it should be. But I think I think 6 is, you can see 6 going, and it's based on team needs. It's not based on best player available. And going back to that Eagles theory we have here, you're right on the cornerbacks. I'm looking at some of the depth here on the big board, and you're right. You have top 3, and then there is a pretty big drop off. Jeff Gladney, AJ Terrell from Clemson. Arnett's pretty good though. He's dropped down quite a bit over the last couple of weeks too, and I have no idea why. But maybe that is a strategy. I'm sure the Eagles have considered every single possibility and situation, but that would really shore up their defense. But they need somebody too, other than Deshaun Jackson, to stretch the field. So that's why these guys get paid all this big money.
Well, and I think another interesting one here too is that you've got over under 6.5 defensive backs in the first round. The under very heavily juiced out there, kind of seeing that one in the minus 250 range at some places with under 6.5. And I mean, look, this makes sense. You've got Okudah, you've got Henderson, you've got, I think Terrell does go in the first round. I think that he probably should. I mean, you talk about a guy coming out of that Clemson football factory. He's kind of one of those safer picks, I think, too, in the sense that he's going to start for you for a long time, whether you start him on the strong side corner or the weak side corner, whether you want him to be against a wide receiver one or not, still going to be a really good player. The question then becomes, Xavier McKinney out of Alabama, he's a first-round pick at safety. For whatever reason, Isaiah Simmons is listed as a linebacker. He's more of a safety kind of hybrid type of guy. Keep in mind, too, that, the manager's discretion is going to decide some of these props. And that could be a little bit of a dicey thing, too, depending on how Simmons is labeled. Make sure you know exactly what source the books are going to use for that. But if Simmons is labeled as a safety, he's obviously going in the first round. Beyond that, for defensive backs, does Christian Fulton go out of LSU? I think there's a good chance because, again, you've got a lot of really positive film on him. You've got a guy like, the name escapes me now. You got a guy like, Trevon Diggs. I mean, does Trevon Diggs go in the first round? Yep. Being a guy coming out of that Alabama football factory. You've got a lot of question marks with defensive backs. I think wide receivers and offensive linemen are pretty cut and dry that they're going to go. I think defensive backs, depending on the mock you look at, maybe the plus 170 on over 6.5 is worth it. But again, judging by the minus 250 on the under, that implies to me that we're probably going to get 5 or 6 of them here. We're not going to see 7. And again, the betting market being my guide as opposed to the mock drafts.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the bet there is under. It's interesting, too, that both corners for Ohio State, I don't know if that's a prop bet or not. It probably isn't likely to happen, but they both could arguably go in the first round. Arnett is ranked pretty high. And, of course, Okudah is top 3 for sure.
So let me ask you about this here, because there's been a lot of talk about this, and, I think that maybe it happens. I don't think it's going to be the guy that everybody expects it to be. I guess that's kind of my bold prediction here. But a running back in the first round, right now that's over under half a running back. So basically, will a running back be drafted in the first round, yes or no? That's minus 150 as we look out there at Bet Online. It's one of those things to me where I don't know if it's worth it in today's NFL, in particular with a run-first type of running back like a DeAndre Swift, like a Jonathan Taylor. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the only first-round running back that I would take because of his pass-catching ability. But do you think one of them does end up getting taken tonight in the first 32 picks?
I'm on the side that there won't be a running back in the first round, and the talent level is a little bit lower than previous seasons, I think, overall as a body of players. But more importantly, I think, what's the average lifespan of a running back in the NFL? It used to be 2 3/4 years, and it's dropping. It just seems like every year it's less and less. And the Giants obviously took a shot at on Barkley, and I think that's going to pay off. But I don't see a Barkley on this list, not even close. Jonathan Taylor, has set all kinds of national records at Wisconsin. Tremendous young man, great character, definitely could build a team around him at the NFL level. But are you going to pick him as your first pick? That would have to be one of the teams late in the round, I think, that would pull the trigger on that and say, all right, we're going to grab him. But I think realistically, a lot of these guys will go early second round to maybe even mid to late second round. So with all the other talent that's out there that we've already talked about, the offensive linemen, I think there's even a prop bet out there. Are there going to be more wide receivers taken than offensive linemen? And when was the last time you ever saw something like that? So if you assume that it's going to be 6 wide receivers and let's say 5 offensive linemen, that's 11 picks right there. And then you have all the defensive backs. You have some tremendous defensive tackles. The guy from Auburn, obviously, is going to go very high. He's probably going to be the 3rd pick unless Detroit trades it. And then you just run out of numbers, and suddenly there's no running back in the first round. I think that's how it's going to go, with the exception of who you mentioned, Swift from Georgia. He's definitely proven and definitely can play at the NFL level and can start immediately. So I guess then I threw a monkey wrench in my own theory there by saying that a lot of these guys have the talent to replace the existing starter. And in my opinion, replacing a starter who's gone through the NFL season, and I don't think the fans really realize what Monday mornings are like in the training room for some of these guys. When they get hit hard, and they have protective gear on. Yes, that's true. But, if you see what their bodies look like and the bruising and everything else that goes on week after week after week, that's why these younger guys coming in can replace the existing starter or at least share time with the existing starter. So that would throw a wrench into my theory that there won't be one, but I'll stick with my guns here and say there won't be a running back in the first round.
The only thing that I think, could change my perception regarding a first-round running back is that you look at 2 teams that had really high-profile success in the playoffs last year, Tennessee and San Francisco. And these are 2 teams that, effectively run first offenses. Obviously, we know San Francisco does with their trio of backs and using a fullback and a really good offensive line. And obviously for Tennessee with Derrick Henry, Derrick Henry's presence is what really helped elevate Ryan Tannehill. So you've got some teams that, and I guess you could say Baltimore too, kind of a run first offense, but because they've got a Lamar Jackson, they've got that mobile quarterback, they can run options, they can do a lot of quick runouts and stuff like that. That's just a different kind of offense. I think that you kind of sort of look at this thing and you say, okay, what is the recipe for success in the NFL going forward? Is it the New Orleans Saints? Is it having that swing back Alvin Kamara type of guy? If so, then your guy is Clyde Edwards-Helaire, or maybe to a lesser extent a J.K. Dobbins, who's also a really good receiving back. Is it a Kansas City thing where you've got, you run a guy like Damian Williams, but predominantly your offense goes through Patrick Mahomes, and that's what you want to do. So that's kind of what I look at is fundamentally and philosophically, do you want to be the Niners and the Titans? Do you want to be, the Saints? Do you want to be a Green Bay or a New England where it's really on the shoulders of your quarterback? What do you want to do? And I think, to me, the most likely blueprint for success is throwing the football and using your running backs as wide receivers. And the teams that are late in the first round here that are probably going to take more of that approach may not be interested in a first-round running back. So, people keep saying, like, DeAndre Swift to New England. Does New England all of a sudden pivot to being this run-first offense because they don't have Tom Brady? I guess. But if you're going to do that and you want a bell cow, is DeAndre Swift that guy? Is he physically able to do that for you? I don't know. So I lean on the side of no first-round running back. But, again, a running back can be a relatively safe pick in the sense that, you can pass with him, you can run with him, you can protect the quarterback with him. He's probably not going to hurt you as a GM in terms of your job security. So I don't know. I just think philosophically with where the NFL is, I think Kyle Shanahan is the exception. And let's keep in mind, Kyle Shanahan got his start as a pass-oriented offensive play caller. The running back thing, maybe he just wanted to do something differently relative to everyone else and had great success with it, and he's a brilliant offensive mind. So I don't think a running back is worth a first-round pick in this class in particular. And I think the guy I like the most is Edwards-Helaire because of the receiving ability. I think that's an early second-round type of trade.
Yeah, I like that. The thing with the Patriots, you look at the passing stats of Brady, the yards per pass attempt, and was declining, and it not necessarily was him getting old either. It was basically didn't have much of an offensive line this year. There was a lot of injuries across the line, but the attempts were much shorter and much quicker. So time to release the ball under 1.7. 2 is considered very, very good. So I was saying when you were saying that if you do have a Clyde Edwards-Helaire from LSU type of player, he can line up in the slot as well as in the backfield. And that's a pretty powerful weapon. I would think for a team that has a suspect offensive line, that's the easiest way to slow down a pass rush, as we all know. You run a couple of those plays in the slot, and all of a sudden that pass rush isn't nearly as fierce. And I think that's really been a lot of Brady's success over the years, too, is that he had the ability to recognize when and where the blitz was coming from. And then they would do those little dump offs that people who don't like the Patriots learn to hate. So I like your idea with that, with the running back that can catch the ball as a possible late round first round pick. But certainly in the second round, he might be one of the first ones to go now that you brought that up. I would certainly take him over Swift and Dobbins in an offensive scheme that's going to use the running back as multiple different types of weapons. You could line up that LSU kid on the wide receiver out by the perimeter. That would stretch a defense. That would automatically slow down a pass rush. You get a kid like that on a linebacker, and it's a mismatch. I like that idea, Adam.
Well, we'll see what happens tonight in the first round, and we'll be back tomorrow. John and I will sort of recap what we saw for the first round, kind of talk about what this means for the subsequent rounds for these teams, and also some thoughts on what it means for the 2020 season, assuming we have one, whenever that actually starts. So we'll do that on the Friday edition of Bang the Book Radio here. But, John, where can people find you, and where can people kind of banter with you here throughout the evening's festivities?
Right now I'm on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter as often as I used to be, but now that I think we're maybe halfway through this pandemic, I'm going to make an effort to start providing some free betting systems. I've been doing one a week, so I'll pick up the pace on that one a little bit and just have general discussions on what everybody's doing. I've also been trading the market, which has definitely had my attention, and that's satisfied my need for action. For those that don't know, I had a Wall Street career that was pretty long. Managed 32 traders in the crude oil pit, and I think just 2 days ago we saw crude oil trade negative $34 a barrel, which I never thought in a million years I'd ever see that happen, but that's the type of world we live in. So that means there's so much oil out there that those people that were holding those contracts had nowhere to store it and had to sell it off at a loss just to get rid of it. We all know gas prices are going down, right, Adam?
Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's not. I mean, obviously, I wish everything was better with the economy, but it's not bad when you have a truck and gas is, $1.25, $1.30 a gallon.
Yeah, a friend of mine lives in Dallas, and it's been about 3 weeks ago, and he sent me a picture. It was $1.37, and he filled up for $19. And now, of course, it's lower.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what keeps happening with that, and maybe at some point here we'll have you on after the draft to talk about the market, maybe some investment stuff. Maybe not a bad idea to do that here with something else for us to talk about, because after the draft we don't really have much to look forward to. I guess maybe UFC comes back. Golf's supposed to come back in June, maybe NASCAR in late May. Other than that, we don't really have a whole lot to look forward to. So we'll have to find some different things to talk about here on Bang the Book Radio with John Ryan at John Ryan Sports and the number 1 on Twitter. John, appreciate your time as always, man. Thank you so much. Enjoy the draft tonight. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
You bet. Thanks a lot, Adam. Take care.
There you go. There's John Ryan. Once again, professional handicapper at John Ryan Sports and the number 1 on Twitter. And as we just said, we'll be back on Friday taking a look at what happened in the first round, grading out some of these props and how they kind of played out here, and then take a look at the later rounds in the draft and also some thoughts on the upcoming NFL season based on what we saw in this first round. That'll do it for me. Thank you so much for listening, everybody, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.